like he should anyway coast into another nomination. He will have a tough fight in the general, but all signs indicate that a guy who the Florida press refers to as the Cuban Donald Trump was not able to put a big dent in Rubio, despite some manful videos. Got this one.
Yeah, okay, so Rubio's got to turn to the race in Arizona because a lot more questions about this one. Senator John McCain facing a tough challenge from Kelly Ward.
Yeah, this looked like it might have been a tough challenge, but you could sort of tell as the week wrapped up for Kelly Ward that as she was last week talking about John McCain might die in office, that is not a good sign. This is not a good sign. If you are saying that your argument is that your opponent could die, that does not mean you are doing well in the race. And in fact, we have one poll, not a lot of polling data in these states, not a lot of primary polling data, but the scanty data that we do have suggests that she's going to get roasted out there and that McCain will be returned for another nomination. But then he also has a much tougher than expected general election race in Arizona, which looks like it could be shaping up to be a swing state this year.
Right. Well, that's the key here. So, I mean, that's one challenge that he's got. But when it comes to the general, what are you expecting? Well, let's do Florida first, because it's been a rough couple of months for Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz. She's at risk now of losing her primary. How's she going to do you think?
It's almost impossible to poll a House district like this. She is expected. She better win. She had win, but there are disconcerting signs for her that, in fact, she won't. Hillary Clinton was down there to stump for her, did show up to show solidarity with her, but the former Democratic chairwoman has big problems on her hands.
Yeah, big problems in the general, you think?
Well, now, wait a minute. I don't know if that's going to be true. That should be a very reliably Democratic district.
Right,
whoever wins the Democratic primary, we would expect to do fine in the general.
Well, let me get your take on handicapping what's going to go on in the general election, because, people are wondering if the Trump factor changes whether or not the Republicans will hold on to the House and Senate.
So recent history says that whoever loses the presidential race is going to lose the Senate. The Republicans need to hold the Democrats to 4 if Hillary Clinton does win the general election. So the Republicans need to hold the line there. And if they do, or even, let's face it, if it's essentially a tie, there's enough swing votes that you get to sort of stasis in the Senate. So for the Republicans, their hope is that 4 seats or fewer, but 4 or 5 at the most, and that Tim Kaine be that swing voter. Now, if it switches and the race picks up for Donald Trump and he gets back in contention in this sucker and he wins, then the Republicans would expect, of course, to win by to expand their majority or at least maintain it.
Yeah, really interesting stuff, Harlan. How do you see it?
Yeah, well, how important is it that Marco Rubio is in this race and that he's going to win his primary for Donald Trump? I mean, I think Marco Rubio is building, a legendary turn out the vote operation in Florida that without question has to help Donald Trump down there.
Well, I think that the two men's fate are interrelated in Florida. Certainly, Donald Trump is not likely to win the presidency without Florida, and he would want Marco Rubio to do very well down there. But I would expect to see a very high correlation between the two. You look at a Rubio versus somebody like Rob Portman in Ohio. The worst that Trump has done in Ohio, Rob Portman has done better. He has managed to be an island unto himself. In Florida, we see Rubio, polling now indicates that Rubio and Trump are highly correlated. So whoever wins Florida on the presidential is probably going to win on the Senate and vice versa.
Chris, question for you about Arizona. So when we're looking at Senator John McCain, he's done very well in the primaries in the past. It's almost been a landslide for him. Now we've seen Kelly come on the scene and she started to inflict some damage. Can that have real repercussions for him going into the general election because of what she did in the primary? Or is it because Arizona is such a swing state right now that she's not having the impact?
Probably helps him in the general when you have attacks like the ones that she launched on his health. When you have her attacking him, it's not done. And people generally won't stand for it. So when you do that, he's going to be, I think today's his 80th birthday, in fact.
Right.
That, yes, he is an older American, but where she went and what she did probably increases sympathy for him. The problem that conservative insurgents have had in Arizona is that they haven't picked great candidates. The ones that they've tried for 2 consecutive cycles to use to knock out McCain haven't been able to deliver the goods. And in so doing, McCain has probably helped in the general election. It also probably helps differentiate himself with Trump, and this is going to be a weird election in Arizona.
Chris, Harlan Hill here again. If Debbie Wasserman Schultz loses her primary to Tim, what does that signal for the Democratic establishment? I mean, we know that Bernie Sanders was, has been out for Tim and has railed against Debbie Wasserman Schultz. What does that mean long term for the Democratic establishment, for the DNC? How does that hurt Hillary?
I would chalk that one up to fairly localized to Debbie Wasserman Schultz. She had a very uneven tenure at the DNC. Hillary Clinton is trying to get control of the DNC, get things evened out. Debbie Wasserman Schultz had a rough patch, and the only reason, in fact, that she kept the job at the DNC was that nobody else wanted it, because the roles of the parties, that we've seen very much in this cycle, have changed dramatically. Her loss, I think, would be substantially attributed to her. Yeah, there's probably some sniff factor for Hillary Clinton, but mostly I think this is a DWS story. Yeah,
DWS story, because even people in her party were upset after the treatment of Bernie Sanders.
Exactly. She did what she saw her job to be, which was to make sure that Bernie Sanders wasn't the Democratic nominee and that Hillary Clinton was. So a lot of Democrats are probably grateful for that, because Bernie Sanders couldn't have probably won a general election. So they're probably grateful for that, but now she's going to pay the price.
All right. We'll leave it there. Chris, great insights as always. Thanks so much.
You bet.
Chris Stirewalt there. Still to come, the South bracing for rough weather.